Hello, and welcome to another of the Nautical Institute's technical webinars. This one looking at mentoring at sea. I would say good afternoon, which it is here in London. I'm David Petraco from the Nautical Institute's headquarters staff here in London, but I am joined by a wonderful panel of our members and passionate mentors from around the world, who I will introduce in due time. But in the meantime, hello, everybody.
Hello, David.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
So, I hope that everybody is familiar with the Nautical Institute, but if not, we are an international professional body. As an international professional body, our main role is to help our members with professional development, and we take great pride in that. We also represent our members' point of views and feedback to the industry. We have a seat at the IMO, we work with IALA, various other organizations, and that's how we help promote maritime and best practice. We do this by sharing information. We're all professionals around the world. Nobody's an expert in everything. So the purpose of us as a professional body is to listen to our members, to talk to our members, to share ideas. And that's exactly what we're doing here today. We've got people from around the world, different ranks, different experiences, different cultures, and it's important that we share our knowledge so that we can help with best practice. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with mentoring, is look at some best practice in how to mentor and, in fact, how to be mentored. Now, why do we want to share this information? Why do we want to build best practice? Why do we want to improve ourselves? Well, at the Nautical Institute, we absolutely believe that professionals make better decisions. Now, that might be a better decision about safety. It might be a better decision about a commercial operation. It might even be a better decision around your career progression. But the fact is, if you share information, if you maintain your knowledge, if you increase your knowledge, you will be a professional and you will make better decisions. And that's what we believe. And mentoring is so much a part of that. We have some wonderful opportunities out there in the industry, new technologies for learning, new techniques in the classroom. But at the end of the day, shipping is very complex and we absolutely rely on learning on the job. And mentoring is part of that, and it's so important. And I know that the panel here today will share some of their passions on why that's so important. But before we start, I'd just like to mention that this is an interactive webinar. Although your cameras and your microphones will not work because there's so many of you out there, you are allowed to type in some questions. So if you open up your control panel, there's an area for questions down here, type them in. Please keep them as succinct as possible, and don't forget to press the send button. There are also a range of handouts that you can download. And I will say that Monica has some very nice presentation, and her slides are available to download if you want to. There's also a little bit of background on the panelists, and we do have a book on mentoring at sea, and there's a short extract that you can download as well. After the webinar, there will be a very short survey, just 2 to 3 minutes to fill out, and we do encourage you to do that. It helps us improve our performance and find new subjects for the future, so please help us out with that. About 2 to 3 hours after the webinar finishes, you will get a thank you for attending email. In that email, there will be a link to a personalized certificate of attendance. You're more than welcome to that to put into your continuous professional development or CPD folder. A recording of this webinar will be available from our YouTube channel. Just go on to YouTube Nautical Institute and you will find it there. Please give it to probably about the end of day tomorrow for it to be edited and posted up there. Now, you're not alone. There are well over 500 of you interested in this subject and participating. So as I say, thank you for attending, but please keep your questions concise and we'll try to get through as many as possible. I will now introduce Andre and Monica. Now, Captain Andre LeGoubin, FNI, is the Senior Vice President of the Nautical Institute and just a great, passionate mariner. He is he's currently a mooring pilot for ship-to-ship moorings, a hell of a job that he takes with cool precision. It's just a shame he doesn't apply the same to webinars, but so goes. Huge amount of experience, though, Andre, and he's a great driver and passionate person about mentoring, and you'll find that out. Monica Neharo-Shepard is the founder and director of Lumna. Now, we wanted to tell a story about mentoring, and we wanted to look professional, and we're mariners. We don't know how to do that. So we turned to the professionals, and Monica is certainly a professional in her field. She has her own media company, but more than that, she's not only passionate about mentoring, but she is passionate about storytelling. So what we've tried to do is gone out to our membership, and the panel are all members of the Nautical Institute. They wanted to share their passion about mentoring, and Monica has helped them tell their story. And we want you to tell us your stories. So it is about storytelling. And Monica, thank you so much for contributing so much to this project. And she'll give you a little bit more background on how she's told that story. So on that note, I will hand over to Captain LeGoubin. Sir, you have the con.
Thank you, David. I have the con. Yeah, as we say at sea. And welcome everybody to the webinar this morning. Absolutely delighted you've joined us again to have another conversation on mentoring. Before, I've got an esteemed panel here with us today from all over the world. I'm joining you from a very sunny Florida. I have to get that in. As I was asked to mention it, but we go all the way across to Taiwan on the other side of the world this morning. But before I introduce the panel, I'd like to hand over immediately to Monica to talk about the videos that we produced and have now presented, and then we'll come back, we'll talk a little bit about the effects the videos have had, and then hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions. Monica,
that looks good, Monica.
Hi, thank you, Andre. All right. Well, I'm not going to take too much of your time. I really want to leave the floor for the amazing panelists that we have today. I'm sure the conversation is going to be really, really interesting. But we thought it would be a good idea to just give you a little refresher on what we were doing with this campaign, what we were aiming for, and how did it all come together. So a few months and possibly more than a year ago, I was presented with a little challenge from David, which was the Nautical Institute really wanted to ignite a conversation about mentoring at sea. The Nautical Institute is clearly very passionate about it. They believe in the value of it, and they just wanted to invite everybody to take the 10-minute challenge, because as Andre will probably touch upon in the next minutes, time, for instance, is one of the biggest barriers that they have identified for people to be willing to engage in mentoring. So they really wanted us to try to inspire all of you into taking the 10-minute challenge, where mentoring doesn't need to be a really cumbersome thing that you have to add to the big list of things that you already have to do in your busy life at sea. It doesn't need to take longer than 10 minutes. But then COVID happened, 2020 happened, and so my big idea on how I wanted to create this amazing documentary really became impossible. But that actually opened another opportunity, which was to show a more diverse representation of panelists and of interviewees and stories in our short films, because everything needed to be done online. So through the miracle of the World Wide Web, I was able to basically talk to whoever wanted to talk to me. So let me check. Next, yeah. And so we wanted to just explore the answers to some questions such as what is mentoring? Why should we care about mentoring? Is there any value in it? What prevents us from engaging in mentoring when we are at sea? And how can we overcome the barriers that would prevent us from doing it and fully benefit from mentoring at sea? And this was supposed to be a conversation. We didn't want to tell people how they should think about mentoring. We were honestly interested in how you thought about it. And so since the storytelling world, we know that emotions drive knowledge, I needed to sit down and just think what could be the driving emotion behind all these stories that we are going to be telling. And to me, the strongest emotion that I thought we could tackle was belonging, because all of you here, you have gone to sea following a passion, whether that is the passion to explore, the passion to see other places, the passion to drive ships, or simply to make good money so you can support your family. That's what drove you to the ocean. And so we wanted to connect with that passion that brought, I mean, I'm not a seafarer myself, but I have spent quite a bit of time on board ships, at least for a land person. I'm more than most land people. So we all love the ocean. And so that is the emotion that binds us together. And so here was, in summary, the message that I wanted to convey through the short films, and that hopefully would ignite a conversation. And it's that sharing knowledge decreases marine accidents, and that anyone can be a mentor, and it doesn't require a great effort or lots of time. And then just to invite you to try it, because it would make your ship safer, your crew happier, and your life easier. Agree, disagree, and then the conversation will happen. So we decided to do 5 short films, each one between 4 to 6 minutes long. And each one would follow a theme or a subject regarding mentoring. The first one was just in a nutshell, what is mentoring? Then we moved on to the first big barrier, which is time, and explore how time affects mentoring and how can we overcome that barrier. Then safety, simply asking the question, does mentoring at sea actually create safer ships? Then the next barrier, which is language, and with language also culture. How does that affect mentoring? How can we overcome it? And finally, reflection. What role does reflection play in effective mentoring? So before I talked about the challenge, and so these were the solutions that we came up with. We searched for interested members from the Nautical Institute. I got to know all of them and have short conversations with all of them, which was a pleasure. And then I interviewed all of them either for the main videos that we created or for the social media campaign that followed. We decided to use attractive animations to reenact some of the personal account stories that the interviewees told me, just to keep it a little bit more engaging and not just talking heads all the time. And after they were ready, the videos, we launched a social media campaign that lasted through October, November and December. Sorry, in English, I forgot my months. And so this is actually like a nice wrap up activity that we're doing, this webinar, but the campaign lasted for those over 3 months. And so here is how it more or less looked. These are some of the characters that we created to animate some of the personal account stories that we were told, because at the end of the day, as David mentioned, I am passionate about storytelling, but it's not a personal passion. If we're humans, we are passionate about storytelling. The only way we share knowledge, and the only way we create culture and society, and the only way to be human really, is through storytelling. So for me, it was very important that we didn't simply ask people, do you think mentoring is important? It was fundamental that we got to understand why through the stories, the life stories of those people that we were interviewing. And so we created these characters to represent those stories. So afterwards, we had that social media campaign that I was mentioning, and we really got a lot of engagement. That was so enriching. And so, for instance, we had some comments and conversations where people were just in agreement, right? And so it was very positive feedback. I don't want to bore you by just reading out loud all of these comments, but for instance, somebody agreeing that the 10-minute challenge, when people take it, is really valuable and also really enjoyable. And this person was saying, I'm so happy that my captain took that 10-minute challenge because my knowledge improved a lot. Another person agreeing that mentoring at sea directly benefits safety on board ships, but just continuing the conversation by acknowledging that this particular person is a bit concerned that people are now just Googling answers even for life on board a ship, and that's not the way, according to this person, to do it, because you should refer to your senior officers and learn from them, and not necessarily learn from Google how to drive a ship or do the things that you do on board ships. Then we had some brainstorming going on and about how to motivate people to practice mentoring and overcome the barriers that we can find to mentoring. They acknowledge in this comment that finding a good mentor and a good mentee, or even building that relationship, can be difficult. Sometimes you are interested, but the mentee is not interested, and I suppose vice versa, right? But that this person suggests adding mentoring ideas to bridge team management courses, for instance. So it was really interesting to see how people were not only reacting to the content that we were putting out, but actually driving the conversation on the different subjects that we were feeding into social media. Yeah, so here's another one on how to motivate people to practice mentoring. And so people are acknowledging that culture and language can be very important barriers for mentoring, giving us an example of how often have we seen an order from the bridge, the order "let go forward," being misinterpreted for the anchors being let go instead of mooring lines. So not a seafarer myself, but I suspect this would be quite a problem if you let go of the anchor instead of the mooring lines. But this person ends up by saying, impossible is nothing for us seafarers. So even if language, culture, and some other things can become obstacles for mentoring, it is not a death sentence. We can always find ways to overcome these barriers and engage in mentoring, because at the end of the day, the reward, which is safer and happier ships, is worth it. Then we had some challenging positions, which is great. We didn't want people to simply say, yes, everything is amazing. We also wanted to invite people, if they didn't agree, to share with us why they didn't. And so this for comment here, apparently they believe that mentoring is okay, but it is like a nice to have. It's secondary, right? Safety should be first. And so it's interesting to see that in some cases, people don't necessarily associate mentoring with increased safety, which is a really important conversation to have. And then some person had spoken about how on board their ships there was always an extra officer on the bridge to mentor whoever was driving or whoever was on watch. And this person was like, oh, wow, what kind of ship has that capacity? Because normally you don't have a spare officer just to be there teaching whoever is on the bridge. And that ignited a really interesting exchange after that. This one, again, I don't want to bore you by reading an entire comment that was written on social media, but nevertheless, it's just so, oh, sorry, I seem to have lost my, here, sorry. This is why I think that sharing personal accounts, your personal story or things that you have witnessed is so important, because in this case, is this story of a young person, a cadet that lost one of his eyes because English wasn't his native language, and he was given the instruction of keeping an eye on at the other end of a pipe, and keeping an eye. If you're not familiar with the expression "an eye on," you might interpret that you're actually physically being asked to put your eye on in this case, on a pipe, and so then compressed air was blown through the pipe, and he lost his eye. So what I particularly like about this story, as tragic as it is that the person finishes by giving a little bit of a suggestion on how we can overcome these types of accidents from happening, and it's basically just making sure, not just saying keep an eye on this thing, but actually talking to the person to make sure, especially in something as dangerous possibly as this, that the person understood what you wanted them, or interpreted what you wanted them to interpret. Perhaps if they had taken the extra few seconds to say, what did you understand by what I said, the person could have done the gesture of looking down the pipe, and perhaps that accident could have been avoided. We have also done a few polls during our campaign, and so although you see 25 answers there, that was at the point where we created this graphic. A lot of people are still answering these polls to this day. We're still receiving more and more answers. This, I think, is very positive in the sense that when asked, have you ever been mentored, 88% of the person who responded said yes. I would just say, perhaps it's because we're preaching to the choir here, because my suspicion, based on all the conversations that we had through the campaign, is, I am getting a message that I'm experiencing network connection difficulties. I hope that you are you're able to hear me fine.
Monica, we can hear you fine. Monica, it's coming a little broken at times, certainly okay. Here. But thank you for this summation, and thank you to Luma as well for these wonderful videos. And your comments are so on point there, particularly about the young seafarer that lost their eye, because that reinforces what I say throughout the book Mentoring at Sea, and throughout my experience. Experience can be good and it can be bad. And that was a bad experience, but the knowledge that comes from experience can only ever be good. And I think that absolutely reinforces it, where we can take a horrible experience there of a youngster losing an eye and turn it into good, turn it into safe practices, and raise people's awareness. And that for me is what mentoring is. You're just passing on this experiential knowledge gained from experience. So thank you very much for that. And I'm delighted to be with you today with such an esteemed panel of my Nautical Institute colleagues from around the world. Colleagues who are as passionate about mentoring as I am, and we make no excuse for that. There's nothing wrong with passion. We're joined by Captain Jill Kernick from the United Kingdom, Krushkaita Arellano from Ecuador, beautiful country, Captain Aaron Sankar from India, Neil Bordia from the Philippines, and Gordon Foote, also from the United Kingdom, although I believe at the moment, Gordon, you couldn't be any further if you tried. Hopefully you will get home soon. Welcome all. And if you want to know more about our speakers and how to contact them, the information is in a handout. So here we are, following the Nautical Institute's successful launch of our 5 short videos on mentoring. This mentoring project began at the Nautical Institute about 12 years ago. And for many of those 12 years, David Petrejko and I have talked about how powerful a movie about mentoring would be, especially in a format that appealed to today's younger seafarers, our future. This dream became a reality thanks to the generous funding of the TK Foundation. On behalf of all the seafarers and members of the maritime community that have, following the creation of these videos, gained experiential knowledge through mentoring, I want to say thank you to the TK Foundation for your generosity. We really, really appreciate it. This is an interactive webinar, and as David said right at the beginning, we welcome your questions, your concerns or your comments. Please send them in. We'll do our best to answer them. But let's just look at these videos very quickly. In a nutshell, the first one, the basics of mentoring. Jill, why is mentoring so important and how does it work on board?
Hello. With my experience from working at sea and also from teaching in nautical college, I think that we can't progress at sea without being mentored. Certainly when I first went away to sea, we didn't actually call it mentoring, but when you joined ship, whether it was one of the deckhands or one of the officers, they took you with them and they showed you what you had to do, how to do things. So that is mentoring. Now, I've spent 17 years at sea, worked my way up to captain, and then I've also been teaching in a nautical college for 15 years. And you are so confined as to what you can actually teach in a college that nobody can progress at sea without mentoring. Impossible. And I think I'm very surprised if 12% of those respondees think they've never been mentored. I suspect they maybe don't understand what the word mentoring actually means. So I don't think you can step on board a ship and not be mentored. And certainly we can only cover a really small part of what needs to be known at sea, actually within the training establishments.
The question then, it really does beg the question, where do we get the time for mentoring? And that was the focus of our second video, time, because I knew, and I was absolutely right, the feedback, I haven't got time for all this. And of course, that's where we developed the 10-minute challenge. But Aaron, how do you find time in today's modern merchant marine for mentoring?
Well, you got to ask a question to yourself. I mean, do you want to bring value to another person? If the answer is yes, time is relative. I mean, time is relative. I mean, on a scenario on a ship, I know that you're on a contract and you have a certain amount of time, and it's to find those pockets of time where you can communicate efficiently and effectively to pass the message. But again, and at the core, the underpinning thing is, do you want to bring value to another person? So you can find that time.
I love that, pockets of time. Yeah, I call it mentoring moments. Just when that mentoring moment presents, a second mate struggling to turn a ship around, he's been left alone on the bridge, and you don't go in and take over, but you just step alongside him and offer him a little bit of help, a mentor moment. I love that, pockets of time. And really, at the end of the day, what are we trying to achieve? Is it safer ships? I believe it is. Really, that's what our passion. Gordon, is there a link between mentoring and safety?
Yeah, Andre, yeah, I believe there is, and there always will be. At the end of the day, as humans, we're predominantly land-based, but those of us crazy enough to go offshore or serve in the maritime do so in what everyone would consider is a high-risk environment. Over my 3 decades of being a mariner, my first career was in submarines. My second one now is in marine construction with critical infrastructure. And yes, they're high-risk environments, but controlled. And I think mentoring plays a big part in that, because let's face it, I think we all agree that safety isn't a swear word. It should never be considered an administrative burden. And by whatever means, whether it's the culture or your shipmates and how you interact with each other, makes it a much safer environment. And mentoring plays a big part in that, because at the end of the day, I believe it's all about relationship building and sharing common values. And if you break down barriers of rank, culture, or language, or what the other participants have talked about, then in that effect, you're making more space for people to be able to open up and discuss what fears or reservations they may have. And of course, the most important part with humans, with their communication, is the ability to listen, and actively listen. So whatever rank or capacity that you're serving in whatever environment and whatever any type of vessel, then one of the golden rules really of being a mentor is firstly being able to listen. And if somebody's asking questions, it's because you've allowed or given them that space to to be able to relate any of their fears or concerns. And some of them are not ultimately life-threatening, but could be, of course. So, you know, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And if you allow that space through mentoring and building those relationships to start with, then yeah, it's all for a common good. And if we all shipmates, so, you know, you stay afloat together.
You mentioned that ability to listen, which is so very important. But to do that, we have to be speaking in a common language. You cannot listen to a foreign language because you will learn nothing from that. And language is what I perceive as the greatest barrier to mentoring. And it was the focus of our fourth video. Chris Keiter, how do we overcome language barriers and engage in mentoring on a multinational ship?
Yeah, well, as my experience on board, when we have a different kind of people, different languages, we try to avoid to use slangs or be the most clear as we can be, and frequently asking for clarification or a feedback, you know, in order that everybody understand the right message. So we try to avoid the language barrier. We try to break it down, using or trying to explain them as much as possible our message the way that we want to they understand, or using signs, or sometimes the image when you're talking. So at the moment that if we ask if how they understand us or if it's clear or not, it's just to avoid any kind of accidents in the future or misunderstandings. Just try to use a plain language well as possible that we can.
As one of our responders said, nothing is impossible for seafarers. We're all together on the ship and we have to speak. And I believe practice as well. Yes, there are times when we have to use our own language. I'm fortunate I speak English as my first language, but so many people at sea don't. Excuse me. And just to sort of finish this section of our chat, the last video was on reflection. To me, this is such an important skill, but it's a concept that's relatively new on board the vessels. Neil, how do you think reflection should be promoted as a valuable mentoring skill?
For me, sir, as I've been sailing for around 3 years now, reflection is intertwined in mentoring in a way that whenever you're mentoring, you're also evaluating yourself. You're also evaluating others, and in that way, you can build more of your critical thinking skill. So for us mariners, since seafaring is a never-ending industry, it is never stagnant. So reflection in a way that we have to motivate all the officers that you have to evaluate yourself. You have to evaluate your capacity. You have to evaluate your capability in order for us to have a safer ships. I think that's how reflection is intertwined in mentoring.
Thank you, Neil. I think that absolutely sums it up for me as well. This evaluation of yourself, this self-reflection, taking a holistic view on what you've done. I had it described to me as sitting on top of a hill, looking down on what you've done. And you can look at it from each angle. Well, we don't find too many hills at stake, but you can mentally do that. And I do that sometimes when I've done something that hasn't gone quite right. And I want to work out why. It's very hard to work out what you've done wrong. It's very easy for other people to tell you, but actually working it out yourself, because having reflected on it and learned, we can move on. And until we do that, we can't move on. We could carry on talking about this for hours, I know, but David, I understand over in London, you've got a number of questions coming in. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Andre. We do indeed. We have lots and lots of questions. But Andre, just before we start with the questions, I'd like to just point out that what we're talking about here today is a specific project that we've been doing over the last couple months. And we've been working at the Nautical Institute on mentoring for many, many years, and will continue to for many, many years. This is a project, as Andre said, that we're very grateful for some sponsorship from the TK Foundation to do. But Andre, you and I have been working on mentoring for many years, but you came to me in March with an urgency, and to say that now more than ever, mentoring was important. Can you just explain a little bit what was behind that urgency and why this time that urgency exists more than ever?
I can, David, and in fact, I'm going to address it again at the very end when I close out, because we're seeing seafarers on board ships now where they cannot be relieved, and this is causing such a huge concern for the emotional and mental health of our seafarers. We know anecdotally there's seafarers that went to sea in 2019. They were there for Christmas in 2019. They've been there again for Christmas in 2020. We're now in 2021 and they've not been released, and this is taking an emotional toll. So never more so have we needed mentors on board ships. Seafarers need a mentor, not to share this experiential knowledge necessarily, but just to listen to their concerns and worries and to be heard, because it's sometimes difficult for a seafarer. You know, we all remember what it was like on our first trip at sea. I think we all do here. You know, the emotions that went with it. And maybe that first trip has been extended, and maybe we can't contact home and we've got concerns and worries and we need somebody just to listen. Maybe they can't do anything to help, but they can just be there to be heard. We know it gets harder and harder to leave loved ones behind, but for the younger seafarer, it could be devastating. And not just the younger seafarer. Let's remember the captains and the chief engineers, the two heads on board the ship. They need to be listened to and heard as well. So I'm going to ask you in 2021 I'd like the most asked question of 2021 to be, are you okay? Because I think that's important. Anyone who can speak to a seafarer, please do so. You're being a mentor. You're sharing your knowledge of what it was like when you went to sea. And perhaps even you couldn't get home, but be there, be a listener, and ask that question. Are you okay?
Thanks, Andre. And I know, being the Senior Vice President of the Nautical Institute, you're so passionate about that. And you in your pilotage every day, you come across these people. So thank you for helping us with this project. So the first question from the audience is from Evan G. And he says, what about go and read the procedures and manuals? The most common response to the request for mentoring.
Yeah, that's what we used to, we've heard, go and read the manuals. That's okay if the manuals are written in your language. Gordon, you deal with a lot of this. Perhaps you could come in and talk about it.
Yes, Andre, I live in a world that's full of rules, policies, procedures, and manuals that the size of yellow pages, if people remember yellow pages, the old telephone directory. They're one way of learning, but let's all contemplate the fact, in this context of mentoring, you're learning if you're a subject matter expert, or if you're a green hat that's just joined. You've conducted your training, you have a discipline, a skill, whether you're the ETO or a deck superintendent, a foreman or a rigger. You have those skills already, but when you're on board, I believe that it's not there for instruction or tuition. The mentoring is to have that space and that time, as you rightly say, even if it's just a 10-minute, that challenge is to find that 10 minutes. And you can, whether it's a coffee shop or a toolbox talk, and address issues that are arising.
Thank you, Gordon. And your comment about the biscuits as well, I think, has resonated with all of us around the world. I've heard so many people come back to me on that one. Take that packet of biscuits, or packet of cookies, as we call them over here, and go down and have a chat with people. I just have to thank you for that.
I think that's one of the most informal ways that you can do it, and whether you're the master or what leadership position you're in, and you don't have to be in a leadership position. It's just about humanity, and we're all shipmates together. And if you can break down some of the hierarchies that are there, language, like we've discussed as well, I've got over 20 different nationalities that are working on this project at the moment, with a POB of in excess of 130. But if you can take the time out to go and speak to the rigger or the crane driver, and if it's over a cup of tea and you take a packet of biscuits, it means the world to people. And you know, it's all about respect, you know, gaining that confidence as well. And of course the younger guys or the green hats that are there, that, you know, they catch on to that and think, oh, you know, this is a great way of working. This is a great company to work with. This is a great project to be on. And all that is doing is just building those relationships, those shared values, and allowing people to open up themselves.
It costs you nothing. Nothing, apart from a packet of biscuits.
Tax-free.
David, next one, please.
Thanks, Andre. This one comes from Nasir, and he says, for 50 years of my experience involved with the maritime industry, I strongly believe that only competent persons should be a mentor, not everyone.
Competent people only should be a mentor. Neil, do you think that's right? Do you think you should be mentored by only competent people, and you should mentor only if you feel really competent in doing something? How do you feel about that?
For me, it's partially yes and partially not, because mentoring does not mentoring per se does not specify that you have to be very smart. You have to be very very competent, because when we say mentoring, you're just sharing your knowledge, you're just sharing your experiences. So it doesn't matter if you, if you're just an average person, you're really smart, you're not that smart. As long as you have the will to mentor, to share knowledge to others, I think you can mentor. That's it. It does not require any specific competency. It does not require any specific number of your IQ or your EQ itself.
Jill, do you agree? Should we restrict mentoring to competent people?
No, I think that everybody can mentor. And as Neil is saying, if that person is themselves confident in what they're doing and competent, but you can't measure that. It's not going to be something that becomes an official measurement.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah, so if you've learned to do something, then you can teach one of the cadets. It doesn't mean to say you've got to have a certificate in mentoring. Absolutely.
No. Andre, sorry, if I could just jump in, I just remember something that Neil told me in one of our conversations in this project, which is at the end of the day, in every interaction you're holding on board of a ship, you are mentoring whether you are aware of that or not. The way you carry yourself out, the way you treat other people, the way you share your knowledge in, informal conversations. So whether you're competent or not, I mean, whether what we think about it, does that make a difference? Because in fact, we are mentoring in every moment we interact.
And when somebody says, I don't know where to start with mentoring as well, I say, start with something that you're really good at. So it defines somebody who's competent, but that's where to start. Something you're passionate about, you're good at, and you can share that little bit of knowledge. It can make the world a difference, but you just share that little bit of knowledge. But start with something that you're good at. David, great question. Thank you.
Thanks, Andre. This question comes from Vincent. He says, well, being a firm believer of constructive mentoring, any thoughts on the issues relating to social media and isolation? You are hearing that it is not very prevalent at sea today. How do you motivate both sides?
Motivate both sides with the communication that we have on board.
I think the point is that there's a lot of isolation due to social media. So how do you break that isolation and motivate both sides, both the mentor and the mentee, to have start that conversation on board?
Krishkaita, perhaps you could answer this for us. We have social media isolates people on board. We do see that as soon as people come off watch, they go to their cabins, they're on their laptops, they're on their phones, etc. We don't mix in the ways that we used to socially. And I think that is partly because of social media. How do you think we can overcome that, the barrier of social media, and get people mentoring?
Yes, well, even when we're on board and the people now is used to use the social media, sometimes we need to take a break about it and have like a 5 minutes to have a conversation or like go out of the social media or the internet and to be in the real world. It's very important for everybody. So I think that if we put like 5 minutes to socialize with the people that you are around of you, with your environment, you can connect. You can really have a connection, a real connection with the people. That's the most important, because sometimes even when we have cameras, we have videos in social media, and we feel closer with the people, but we're going very far from the ones that are next to us. So sometimes that's what we're trying to do, just to take a break of the social and the internet, have a real connection with the people that you are around.
Okay, that's great, thank you. And I think also, you know, when we're engaging in our work, we shouldn't be engaging in social media anyway. I never connect my phone when I'm conducting an operation, putting two ships together, because it can be distracting. And I wouldn't want to do that. So I wait until we're safely moored up and I've done everything. And then I'll connect my phone to download any work-related stuff that I need, and also to engage in any social conversations. But while we're on watch, and we can, you know, one of the best places to be a mentor is when you're actually working and you're showing somebody how to do something. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Andre. The next question comes from Philip. He says, I find it really difficult to believe that whilst a vessel is at sea, a senior officer can't find 10 minutes a day to talk to a junior officer. Is this a case of can't find the time or doesn't want to find the time because they are unsure of how to mentor?
I'm going to bat that one to you, Aaron. What do you think?
Well, this goes a little bit, if you rewind, our industry has gone from a command control leadership, which we learn out at sea. And when we come ashore, we tend to change that leadership style to more a democratic and a participative leadership style. And this is something which needs to go more on board for the senior officers to be open-minded and to break that fear barrier, break that hierarchy barrier, and to say, yes, and this is my team. And to get a high-performing team, you need to interact and you need to break these barriers, to share knowledge, to break down fear, break down hierarchy, break down cultural barriers, and impart knowledge. And as we say, I mean, we were talking about mentoring. Mentoring does not just, is confined to a professional knowledge transfer. It's much more. It's more the humanity. So if you click, after you sign off, you can still be in touch. You can still be in touch. It's in the end, it's the if you want to, it's the feeling of giving that extra good to another person. That's the foundation. So in summary, it's the leadership style. So that has to be changed. So on ship, you can be a leader in an emergency situation, but on a normal operation, sometimes you have to be a manager, where you have to manage teams.
Okay, thank you. It's interesting, you mentioned cultural barriers, and a lot of people talk about cultural barriers on ships. Now, I'm very fortunate. I work on a multicultural ship, multinational, multicultural ships. We can see 6, 7 nationalities on my ships and different cultures. Absolutely different cultures, people from different places all over the world. And I wonder, is culture really a barrier to mentoring? It's a question I have to ask. Neil, you work at sea at the moment. Do you think culture is a barrier to mentoring, or is it more perhaps language or something else?
Culture will only be a barrier on board ship. On board ship, if it's not respected by others. Because for you to for you to have a an interaction, a personal relationship on board, you have to respect oneself. You have to respect each and everyone's culture, and also in order for you to utilize that, you have to think in a way that you have to move in a way that you will not compromise the other's culture. You will not I mean you will not what do you call this one? You yeah I mean yeah, you just have to respect oneself. Respect on board is very important.
Thank you. I agree 100% with you.
Yeah.
And I believe mentoring actually builds respect between people when they're sharing knowledge, because it's such a friendly thing to do. It's an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
It's a nice thing to do. And people do it because they want to. And of course, that helps build respect. Thank you. Back to you in London, David.
Thanks, Andre. Now, this is more of a comment than a question, but it's an interesting comment. It's from John, who says it's not just about safety. He says there is great scope for mentoring in order to improve efficiency and profitability.
Yes, that's nice, Gordon. Not just about safety. I know you've spoken about this before. Profitability as well. Commercial.
I'd look at it on the context of, you know, the whole business of shipping. It has its financial implications, and the whole world's trying to be carbon neutral, and how we can be efficient in that. And I think the mentoring comes in when you're talking about working in teams and organization. You know, what is your organization, what it's trying to achieve, and how is the teamwork? And I think we'd all agree that if you have that sort of shipmate mentality, you're all pulling on the rope in the same direction, you're all on the same hymn sheet, whatever way you want to look at it, then mentoring does further that cause. I think specifically because efficiencies are always going to be born out of if you are gelling together as a team better, and those little nuggets of sharing experiential knowledge at the coffee shop or when you're on the bridge doing a maneuver, all builds to that relationship and making you as a team more efficient overall. I'm not saying that you're going to get a couple more knots out of the vessel or burn less fuel to achieve that, but whether the efficiencies are borne out in administration because somebody actually understands how that task is supposed to be conducted correctly without errors, and it's that little bit of mentoring that made that possible, and so forth. So I know a lot of the modern marine now are talking about with the reduced manning and the administrative burdens that are there. So, you know, if one person is taking that on all the time because they're the only one that knows how to do that task, then mentoring in all its forms means that all the burdens are shared around the crew themselves. So efficiencies can be borne out in a multiple ways like that.
Thanks. David.
Thanks, Andre. We've got a question here from a character named Trevor, who I think you and I both are familiar with. He says, Andre makes a good point referring to the master and the chief engineer. Who do they turn to for mentoring? They are often good mentors, but really, are they mentees? Shore management needs to be involved as much as seafarers. So we are talking about mentoring on board, but who mentors those top people?
Absolutely. And in fact, in my book, Mentoring at Sea, the 10-minute challenge, this is something I address, because when it is the master or the chief engineer that needs the mentoring, he needs the experiential knowledge and he can't get it. And this is where the link to the shore must be so strong. I believe superintendents in this instance can play a big part. Not particularly passing the knowledge, although they may be able to, depending on their background, but also facilitating the master and the chief engineer gaining that knowledge that they need. But there has to be a confidence there. There has to be a confidence that the master can go to the superintendent and say, I need this knowledge, I need to have it. And And that can be so very difficult. So we have to open up the communication there, the link. Aaron, have you any further views on that?
No, that's pretty right what you said, Andre. I mean, you need to have that connection to shore. I mean, in my experience, the captains call and then you exchange. I mean, you are not trying to tell them what to do. They are the man on station. They know the best. But it's just a matter of exchanging and bouncing off each other and dissecting the whole problem and finding a solution together. So so I would not say mentor-mentee. It's about bouncing off that conversation. So be open for that.
Jill, I'd like to come to you as well, as somebody in command. You know, what about when it's us that needs this knowledge? When we need mentoring?
I turn to a colleague, somebody with similar experience working on the same type of ship. That's what I would be looking at.
And also being able to recognize that you need the knowledge as well when we need it.
Never stop learning. You never stop learning. It's true, isn't it? Every port is different. Every day is different. The wind is different. The sea is different. We never stop learning.
No, you know, we don't. We absolutely don't. And I think that, to me, is the dangerous time. When you think, I've got this sussed, I've got it now, I know what I'm doing. Lord, doesn't it bite? You know, no, we don't. We never get there. And certainly in my experience and in my career to date, you know, I'm so lucky with the mentors I've had and the mentors I've got. David, I'm very conscious of the time.
Yep. Got a few more questions here. Well, we actually have a lot of questions, but I've got a few more flagged up. And this one is Kunwar, and he says, competency is not just knowledge. It is a combination of knowledge, skills, and attitude. Well, mentoring is, or mentoring at least, one of these things that can be transferred. So I think this is a comment on a previous conversation.
Lovely. Thank you. Yeah.
And just to go back to that one about the masters and the chief engineers, you do have, I certainly have been mentored very well by pilots, and I know that superintendents coming on board have a mentoring role as well. So that's an opportunity. This question is from Georgius. He says, is it possible to define the thin red line between mentoring and training? It's very easy to cross it and then change the entire concept. So can we define this line?
The line between mentoring and training. Aaron, start with you. A final comment. Let's go around just everybody, perhaps just to finish up on this one. The line between mentoring and training.
Let me break it up this way. I mean, I want to bring in another word, coaching. So you got coaching, you got training, you got mentoring. So training is specified to a subject. Coaching is working on the job. Mentoring is the sphere gets a bit bigger. It goes to the human side, the culture, relationships, everything else. So did I answer that correctly?
Absolutely. Gordon, final comments, please.
It's very much like Aaron said, it's about the whole psychology of what we're there to do as professionals, or what could be expected of us, and it might be a small part in some people's view, but it has probably the biggest impact, and that is, as I say, the whole psychology of it. You know, you're all shipmates, you're in it together. Use what those valuable times that you have to make that bigger impact, and it only takes a few words sometimes, or like you said earlier, you know, are you okay? That can start the conversation. That's enough for some people. Yeah.
Thank you. Neil, you've been trained and you've been mentored.
Yes, for me, what divides mentoring and training is the approach. For me, when you say mentoring, it is a two-way approach because you are sharing knowledge. And when you say training, it is more like passing your knowledge on to the other, which is more like a beginner. So I think that that's what divides mentoring and training. I have been both mentored and trained, and I think that's going to be the specifics of that.
Thank you. Jill.
Okay, I think that mentoring it has to happen all the time, and there's no way that anybody can learn to do the job on board ship without being mentored. We certainly can't teach it to youngsters or officers in the nautical establishments. It has to happen on board ship, and every ship will have different practices. So just because you have a qualification, whether it's an officer watch ticket or a master's ticket, you can't just jump from one ship to the other. You do need that mentoring.
Thank you. Krishkaita.
Yes, well, actually, yes, mentoring, it's the whole package that you can have because you are mixing the psychology and try to go more and deeper with another person. And as well, you can learn the things that are not in the books. Every day that you are on board, you're mentoring, as Danielle said, because training is just when you go specific, like in a specific topic and a specific schedule that I have. But in mentoring, the things are flowing as the environment is doing. So you receive like a nutshell the things and the knowledge at that moment because it's just happening. It's not something that you plan. Okay, today I will mentor something like this because you are going in training. I think that's how the difference that you can do with mentoring.
Thank you, Krishkaita. Thank you very much. And for me, it's mentoring. There must be a need. Somebody needs mentoring. There has to be a want. Somebody wants to be a mentor. And again, it comes down to the reward, because for mentoring, there is no designated reward. Somebody is not going to pay you more because you've been a mentor. The rewards are huge, and we see that from time to time. And sometimes we don't see the benefits at all of our mentoring, but we know it's there. So for me, there has to be a need and a want, and that's different to training or coaching. We're going to have to leave it there as time is pressing. I'd like to thank our panel of speakers, to Jill, to Aaron, to Krishkaita, Gordon, Albert, and Neil. Thank you for your support of the project and for so readily sharing your experience and the passion you've put into this. Your help has been invaluable. But this is not the end of the project. I hope for you it's just the beginning. Please, everybody, take the 10-minute challenge and look out for mentoring opportunities as they arise within your daily work routines. Infuse mentoring into your actions and see the difference it makes. As Jill has said, include everyone in everything. Such wise advice. As we close, my final thoughts, as I said earlier, with those seafarers still away from home and unable to get a relief, and those stuck at home, probably not being paid and unable to get back to their ships. Conditions are just getting worse and worse for many, and we heard just yesterday of further restrictions being imposed on seafarers' travel. Now, more than ever, seafarers need that mentor. Not, as I said before, to share experiential knowledge, but maybe just to listen to them and to be heard. We know how hard it is. Please, if you're in a position to speak to a seafarer, do so. And let's make 2021 be the year, as I said before, when the most asked question of a seafarer is, are you okay? Thank you so much for joining us today on the webinar. Back to you, David.
Thank you very much, Andre, and thank you everybody on the panel. That was fantastic. And Andre, thanks for keeping us on time. Just before we wrap up, just a few references here. If you want more information on this project, there's a link there, and I've sent it in the chat box. Sorry, it was a little bit sloppy at first. I'm still learning the system, but it's there if you want it. Visit the Nautical Institute at that website, and if you're interested in Andre's book, it's available on the website. And again, a final special thanks to the TK Foundation for funding this specific project. And thank you, Monica, for your wonderful storytelling and your dedication to this project. And just on the final note, the Nautical Institute, as I mentioned, we are a membership organization. We hold conversations, we share knowledge, and we help each other. So if you'd like to join that conversation, please do join the Nautical Institute. You'd be most welcome. So thank you very much. I thank all the panelists very much. I thank all the attendees very much. There are so many questions, and I'm sorry we didn't get to them all, but I will share those with Andre afterwards, and I will invite the panelists to log off, and then I will end the session for everybody. So thank you again, and Happy New Year and safe travels.
Thanks, David. Bye-bye, everyone.
Have a happy new year. Bye-bye.